You're listening to the Exhibitionist podcast, hosted by Nicola Reader and brought to you by inspiringexhibitors.com and Pro Extra, a wholly owned subsidiary of 12th Man Solutions Limited.
Hi there and welcome to episode 22 of the Exhibitionist podcast. I'm Nicola Reader, your host, and as always, we are delighted to have you join us. On this week's episode, we will be handing over shortly to the conversation we had with industry heavyweight Andrew Reid of William Reid, who's talking to us about all things exhibitioning in his career and also ordering live animals for some events that he's been involved in. So stay tuned for that one. Before we get to that conversation, I just wanted to pick up on something that we wrote about in the blog last week that has been gathering a little bit of momentum and getting some really good feedback. And that was our trip to the Game of Thrones exhibition last week in Belfast. Now, if you're not a Game of Thrones fan, please don't hit the pause button or the stop button at this point and think that there's nothing of interest for you in this conversation, because I'm really hoping that there will be. So, as much as I'm a little exhibition geek, I am also a little Game of Thrones geek, although I have to say I don't necessarily get every single little bit of power play that's going in there. I just like the characters, or I dislike many of the characters actually. So when we heard the touring exhibition was coming over to Belfast, we thought we'd nip over there, have a look around and see what it was all about. Now, we're used to spending a lot of our time on the show floor of trade exhibitions, and the alternative word of exhibition, as in a showcase of artwork or an installation of some type, is quite different. So we just thought, was there anything that we could learn from that type of an exhibition that actually would be meaningful and relevant to exhibitors? And there was quite a lot, actually. So if you hop over to the blog at www.inspiringexhibitors.com, you can read about all the things that captured our eye. But the two things I wanted to pick up on today were community and differentiation. So starting with that point of community, one thing that felt brilliant as we walked into the Game of Thrones touring exhibition was that we were with lots of like-minded people. And while Game of Thrones can be quite divisive in the outside world, some people love it, some people hate it, actually we were with our tribe and we were all together, we were all in our geeky t-shirts, we were all there with our cameras at the ready, we all knew exactly who Jon Snow and Arya Stark were. And we were there together. This was our club. And that felt brilliant. And that you could spend that couple of hours just surrounded by like-minded people. You could scream in delight when you saw the Hall of Faces. You could shriek when you walked through the crypt. You could stroke a dragon's head. And nobody thought you were a bit weird, which we probably were for an afternoon. But what does that mean for exhibitions and trade shows? I think it's really about how you build that community. So we're hearing much more about how younger people, millennials, as they're starting to come through, are wanting more experiences than things. They're much more interested in creating memories and being entertained at the things that they go to. They want to talk about something that they touched or felt or smelt or tasted, rather than just something they were given or some information. So building that community of like-minded people, of fans who love your products or your service, starts a long time before you hit the show floor. And that's really about engaging in all that pre-show marketing to get some feedback from your fans about what they want to see from you at the show, what they're hoping to find out and maybe network with other people. Where in that community have you got people you can put together? So people who could work collaboratively on projects, or people who are like-minded and can solve a problem. So that sense of community just felt brilliant. And I think if in any way as an exhibitor or even an event organizer, you can find really creative ways to build that community where you all feel like you're in it together, you're fighting for the common cause, you're trying to solve a problem in your industry, then I think that can really, really help you as an exhibitor to extend your footprint beyond just the show that you're working on. One example from a client we're currently working with in the digital construction industry is around one of their key experts, one of the knowledge leaders within the industry, who's really built up a presence and a profile over the years and is known for being an expert and leading a lot of projects in the digital construction world. And actually they have a little bit of fun with that. He's the personality of the business. He quite often does a lot of speaker slots, and even things like where they're giving away free cookies maybe from their stand. They've got fans coming up and saying, oh my gosh, are his brain's baked into these cookies. Do we get a little bit of his knowledge if we have one of these? And it's kind of building that fan base and that community around that. So if you can find the reason for for why people can come together around your product and your service, then it's a great way of building those fans beyond just the footprint of the show. So the second thing I wanted to talk about was differentiation. And this was just to really highlight how important it is to make sure you've got different mediums and different channels for people to get information and insight from you during an event. So over at the Game of Thrones exhibition, we were there with a couple of friends who were a little bit older than us and certainly had very different interests. So one friend was very much into needlework and craft, so seeing the costumes up close and the intricacies of what had gone into that costume making was really what made it exciting for her. There were other people who were really into the swords and wanted to be standing and being the hero with the swords and creating the poses that they'd seen their heroes making in the shows. For me, the Hall of Faces, where I could go and take my photograph and wait for it to pop up somewhere on that iconic picture of the Hall of Faces, was the thing that they had to drag me away from, to be honest. I think they called security at one point. But that's where I wanted to spend my time. And there was just a lot of different things to do, whether you were just walking through something at your own pace, whether you were going around with an audio guide so that you could get all the very intricate details about everything that was on display, whether you just wanted to quickly read the maybe 50-word imprint next to an exhibit and that was enough for you, and then move on to the next thing. It just all depended on what you were particularly interested in as to where you spent the most of your time. And quite often we will see exhibitors saying, we need TV screens, we need some literature, we need to have some graphics boards, and we need a giveaway. And that's because that's the rules of exhibitions. They don't really think about what role is each of those different mediums playing for different people based on how different people want to learn. So what is it about a brochure that somebody who loves a brochure really needs to get from that? It is more detailed, definitely, but it's kind of quite structured, and it needs to give them a lot of things so that they feel they have a lot of knowledge before they go and talk to somebody else. If somebody's very visual, then big pictures, big images of things on your graphics work really well for them in being able to pick up information quickly. So as much as a lot of people say, yeah, we will have all those different mediums, sometimes maybe there's not as much thought going into why you need those different mediums and the roles that they're playing, and actually what might be driving somebody's decision to either pick up a brochure or watch a video or interact with a game. And we are all very different. So the more different things you can have on your stand to really help people get the best out of it, then the best chance you have of making the right connection with the people who really matter. So I could talk for the next 40 minutes about how brilliant the Game of Thrones exhibition was, and I could probably have hundreds of our listeners coming back to me and saying that, what am I going on about? Game of Thrones is rubbish, it's a load of nonsense. So I just hope whether you love it or hate it, that made some sense and you got something out of it. I'm sure far more importantly, you would like to hear from our guest this week, Andrew Reid of William Reid. So I will hand over to him now and hope you enjoy the conversation. So on this week's episode of the Exhibitionist podcast, we are delighted to have with us Andrew Reid, who is MD of Events and Exhibitions at William Reid. So Andrew, welcome to the show.
Hello.
So today we are looking at getting all your weird and wonderful stories from years spent in the industry. But before we get into that, can you just give us a quick review of your history, background, experience, and the current role that you're involved in?
Well, it rather depends on how far you want to go back. But and if you're talking about my experience in the live events world, I suppose I could probably go back to when I was the entertainment officer in the officers' mess, the Night 12 Lancers, and we did all the summer party planning and all that sort of stuff, which was great fun actually, and it taught you quite a lot about actually from an operational side of it, how to build things. So we used to transform the mess into out of Africa themes and Tarzan huts and all that sort of stuff, just by using simple materials. That was a bit of a challenge, I have to say, that one when we had Tarzan, because in those days, I went down to the local zoo and I asked them if we could borrow a couple of lions. So we had parked up on the lawn. We painted a Land Rover black and white stripes and built a cage. And we had 2 live lions parked up on the lawn for that party, which was a bit of a novelty, bit of a challenge. But I don't think you get away with that nowadays.
And can I ask, Andrew,
that was a long time ago.
Were you Tarzan in that situation?
No, I wasn't. No. The commanding officer was Tarzan, and his wife was Jane. So done all sorts of things, and then I sort of got into the industry back in 2000 when we actually bought some shows. We bought the what's now the National Convenience Show, Forecourt Show, and Food and Drink Expo. Then we bought the restaurant show, and then we launched a few bits and pieces since then. And that's kind of how I got into it, really. People, logistics, timing, and treating people as people, opposed to just because you're wearing a grey suit doesn't mean you're a grey person. You can actually be a perfectly normal person, and you still enjoy the same jokes, and you still enjoy looking at the same things in the same way. And just as I say, just because you put a suit on to go to work doesn't make it a boring process.
Absolutely. And having worked with you on a couple of occasions, Andrew, I am absolutely sure no one could accuse you of being a grey person in a grey suit. So almost 20 years in the exhibitions and live events arena now. So what are the biggest changes?
That sounds rather too long for me, thanks. Makes me feel very old.
But you must have seen lots of things changing and evolving in 20 years. What do you think are the biggest changes you've seen in the industry?
But it's really interesting to say lots of things have changed in the industry. Actually, there isn't a huge amount of core stuff that has changed. So you hire a hall, you fill it with stands, and the stands are basically the same principle as they were before. So you have a shell scheme stand, and I remember 20 years ago talking about shell scheme as a commodity and electricity and all the rest of it. So from the sort of the basic structure of the business model hasn't really changed. Some of the way in which it's executed has changed because the technology has evolved, and we no longer use pigeons to promote shows. And we've gone through the Royal Mail, and we're now into e-marketing and social media marketing. But the basic principle is very similar. That you got to get people to go from their desk, commit some time to get to your show, and then when they come there, in the old days it was a bit of a novelty, as in sort of 50 years ago, it was a novelty going to a show. So that was all you had to do. And I suppose the area which we now focus on hugely, and we were, I think, one of the first organisers to be doing this, was really focusing on content. So you've got to give people lots of reasons to attend, and the most important reason we think is about delivering quality content which is relevant for the visitor. So when we were talking about, for the sake of argument, Farm Shop and Deli Show, which we call the Farm Shop and Deli Show because it is for farm shops and delicatessens, all of that promotional stuff to the visitors is done on social media because they don't really have a dedicated traditional media route. And then when you're talking to them, they classify themselves as farm shops and delicatessens. Now, technically, because I come from I work for a publishing company, controlled circulation. If you receive a convenience store magazine, you have to be selling 8 of the following 10 products. And you go through the profile of what it is. And extraordinarily, the classifications of all those products is exactly the same as you sell in a farm shop and delicatessen, apart from fags and mags. They don't tend to sell fags and mags, but they sell greetings cards, they sell all sorts of things. But if you talk to them as, well, you're a convenience store because you've got very good parking, it's very easy to get to, they just go, no, I'm not. I'm a farm shop. I'm not interested. So I think the content and then the language in which you speak to people is really important.
And it's interesting you say that. It feels a real challenge about how you try and appeal to a broad audience, but be kind of targeted enough in your messaging. You want to appeal to as many people as you possibly can, but you need to be really clear that you're talking to them in a way that they understand there's something in it for me.
Well, I agree with that, but I'm not a great believer in chasing numbers. I'm interested in visitor density. In other words, how many people you have per square meter for the duration of the show. Because if you go back to my first comment about parties, all the best parties happen in the smallest rooms. Always in that you mates round. There's a party going on outside of today of all days, and it's 35 degrees. There'll be a party going on outside, but the best part will be happening in the kitchen with a few people having a bit of a natter. And it was always the way where you get people closely knit in a reasonably confined space. They have to have a good blast, and I think it's really important that we focus on, let's say, the visitor density, and then the whole point of our stuff is about relevance. So I'm not interested in frequency. I'm not interested in volume. I'm interested in relevance. And it might sound really pedantic, but actually it's really important, because somebody will come to an event if it is relevant to them. They won't come to the event for a million and one other reasons, like free parking, a free bacon sandwich, and a free this and a free that. If it's relevant, they'll come. And I think a lot of us focus on, got to be the biggest numbers, got to be this, got to be that. And actually, it's not really important. If you get the right people that are relevant in the room, then it'll be a success. So our mantra here is very much now about relevance, opposed to chasing some ridiculous number, because the ridiculous number never go to every single stand. And as I was talking to one of our exhibitors yesterday, they were saying, how many visitors you got coming? And I told them, this particular show we had about 6,000, but it's not about that, because not all 6,000 come to your stand. It's about everything else, to which they kind of go, yeah, I get that. And it's really important for us, I think, to be able to articulate the reasons, the emotional reasons for going to a show, opposed to just the business reasons. Yes, the business reasons are important, don't get me wrong, very important, but it is actually about an emotional engagement. And Chris Hughes' AAM, I think is relevant for whatever you're doing, whether it is even writing an article, but if you're organising a festival, a trade show, a consumer show, an awards do, it doesn't matter what it is, any gathering of people, anticipation, arrival, moments and memories. I think it's a really good mantra, and that's another thing which we now wonder. We don't actually wander around the office going every day, but we do apply the principle to what we're doing.
Having been in the William Reed offices, I've now just got this vision in my head of everybody walking around chanting.
Yeah, we do Tai Chi first thing in the morning, and then we do
Well, it's really refreshing to hear an event organizer talk about not chasing numbers, because all the exhibitors we work with will quite often say, what's your objective for a show? And they'll say, we just want to meet everybody. And we try and tell them, if there's 6,000 people going to a show, can you imagine how many staff you need on the stand, how big the stand would have to be? How on earth are you going to follow up with 6,000 people afterwards? It's completely realistic. You need to find the 50 or 100 probably. That's a really big number to just make it relevant for your business.
And I think that I would agree with that entirely, because it's not about the volume, it's about the relevance. And I think the FaceTime project, by the stuff that the AEO do, is really good, because it teaches exhibitors how to exhibit. And it's quite difficult to teach a granny to suck eggs, because I've been doing this for 20 years and I should know what I'm doing. So why should I do it differently? But it is so important. And I've had customers who've taken away 750 case study. It might have been 749, but it was 750 odd leads, as in scans, and not a single one of them converted. So they're saying, it's no good. And you kind of go, well, actually, I think probably your sales proposition is wrong, or why you're scanning people is for the wrong reason. So you need to focus about what it is you're trying to do. And those are quite difficult conversations to be having, because you are telling somebody, it's like telling an advertising person that the advert they put in the magazine doesn't look very nice, or doesn't get the message across. And it is a difficult conversation to have, but it is an important conversation that we have as an industry to get people to exhibit better and more effectively. Because I know the old adage of standing on the stand and having you can't smoke on a fag on the stand anymore, but hiding behind the newspaper, or of course now hiding behind your mobile is it's really easy just to go there and just everybody walks past you. You've got to think about what you're trying to do and make it relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. I know, and the conversations we have with clients of ours while we've done training, and it is those guys who've been exhibiting for 20 years who kind of go, you can't sit there at the start of a workshop, arms folded, staring at us thinking, you can't teach me anything. And then by the end of it, they're kind of going, oh, actually, maybe I haven't been doing this as well as I could have been. And we had a case with a Mako UK who were at the Fit Show earlier this year, and they panicked like crazy the last day of the show because they were about a third down on the number of leads that they would normally get, having gone through a training session with us and were really doubting us on whether we'd done the right thing. But actually talking to them now 3 months later, their follow-up process has been so much more efficient. They've actually got better conversion rates because they've done that first lot of filtering at the show and got rid of the people that just weren't relevant for them. So it makes such a difference. So
Well, I do remember going to see one exhibitor who'd had a very big stand right at the front of the show, and the show will remain nameless, as will the exhibitor. And I walked past it 3 or 4 times on the first day, and I was thinking, oh, God, I'm going to have to bite the bullet here. This bloke has seen nobody, absolutely nobody. So I bit the bullet and walked up to him and said, hello, I'm Andrew Reid, and how you doing? And he said to me, absolutely bloody marvellous, Andrew. I couldn't have expected more. It's been absolutely amazing. I've seen 3 people. We've got 3 deals. Absolutely fantastic. We'll definitely be back next year. And I go, phew.
Wow.
So it's not the volume, it is the relevance.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So without having a crystal ball, we have a new Prime Minister in position from yesterday. We've got Brexit on the horizon. We've got lots of things happening. What do you think is going to change in the industry in the next 5 years? What are you excited about? What are you nervous about?
Well, there's two bits in there. There's the political angle of what do we think is going to happen. God alone knows, because we have a maverick Prime Minister. And there's lots of amusing photographs of him and Donald Trump flying around on WhatsApp and all the rest of it. And my view of life is that the show goes on. If you look at the Italian economy, it might be in sort of meltdown, but they're all alive. They're all buying and selling things, and they all get on with it, despite extraordinary governments and various other bits and pieces. So I think that us as people are very resilient, and we will go on and we will find a way of doing things and doing business the way we want to do it. And interestingly, as a family business, in fact, I got this email came through yesterday, and if I can pull it up, I will do so while I'm talking. It is what it is, and I'm sure we will be taken in a direction which won't please everybody, because Aesop's fable says, try and please everybody and you won't please anybody, and we'll get something. But my point about it all is I think that the exhibition industry particularly is very resilient. Now, we might see some declining revenues because people are taking smaller stands or less people are getting involved. Yeah, I get that. But a lot of exhibition industries or exhibition companies are privately owned or entrepreneurial startups, call it what you like. And interestingly enough, my niece, who sits on the board as a non-exec, has just attended the Family Business Forum. And it is quite interesting because there's 4.8 million family firms in the UK. 18,000 of them are large to medium size. 85% of UK business are family owned. Family businesses employ 13.4 million people. And the tax contribution of family firms is more than the annual NHS budget. And given the downturn on the fashionable, no, that's the wrong expression, given the focus on what you and I would call work-life balance, and the snowflake generation, the world is a different place, and the big boys are no longer necessarily attracting the talent. So I think there's a really good opportunity for us in the exhibition industry, because a lot of us are smallish, medium-sized family businesses or privately owned businesses, to be able to recruit some really good talent, which will then allow us to continue to succeed. Yes, we'll face the pressures of the economic impact in various categories and sectors, but we still need to eat, we still need to drink. If you want to drive a BMW, you want to buy a BMW. If you want to drive an Audi, you want to buy an Audi. So where there is a will, there is a way, and I'm sure that we will continue to do things, but it might just not be on quite the same scale in the next year or two. But I think in 3 or 4 years, we'll be bouncing around and happy and say, what was all that fuss about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I share your optimism there in terms of we might, let's just kind of get on with it now, and we might have a bit of a tough time, but actually we're pretty resilient in this country, and we'll get on with it and come out the other side. But I just wanted to pick up there on your comments about kind of young talent and recruitment. And as an industry, it can be quite a tough industry. It's hard work physically. They're long days on site. There can be quite a lot of pressure. There's quite a lot of people management. And I don't know if for some young people, it's just not always seen as a desirable industry to get into because of some of those factors. So how do you think we can help recruit and, more importantly, retain really great talent in the industry?
Well, I don't see any of those issues as long hours on site and all this. I don't see any of those as problems, because you go on site, it's bloody good fun. It's hard work, but it's really good fun because if you enjoy people and you're a people person, then exhibitions is the ultimate industry to be in. Yeah, they're obviously the different disciplines. There's the sales, the marketing, the operations. And we have projects as well, as we have sort of 4 groups of people. So we get a cross section of people, and we go on site. We have it's really good fun, and I think it's about engaging with your own staff on an emotional level, opposed to just, well, you do sales, you do ops, you do marketing, get on and do it. And if you can engender that enthusiasm in them, then that rubs off on the customers. And we pay a huge we pay a huge amount of attention to making sure everybody has a good time. Not necessarily, when I say good time, I don't mean it's sort of party. I just mean a professionally run, efficient, effective. The operations department do not, touch wood, fingers crossed, and all the rest of it, have not had for ages and ages and ages anybody write in with a complaint.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, so if the guys can turn up on site and have a smooth get in, then it's really useful for the sales team, because when you start selling for the following cycle, everybody's happy opposed to being negative. And I know it's sort of boring. If the car park attendant is rude to you when you get there, that really irritates me, because there's absolutely no reason. I get it in the neck because the guy comes in grumpy, talks to the operations department grumpy, and then the whole thing spirals down. So it's really important, and I think that people, really, really important. Engage them, and it's not necessarily about massive rewards and all the rest of it, though. Different people will obviously look for that, and I don't have a problem with giving recognition and reward where it's deserved. Not a problem at all. But it's not all about money. It's about actually finding the people that are people centric, who are then capable of doing their specific individual skills that we need and want to be able to execute stands or execute shows, and awards as well, for that matter. We do a lot of award schemes here too.
Well, you're clearly massively passionate about the industry and have had a lot of fun over the years. So tell us about the best event you have ever worked on in your career.
Well, from a trade show, I think it would probably be I don't know. Pick one and everybody else gets upset you haven't mentioned theirs.
Yes. Yeah. It's a little bit like thanking people after you've won an Oscar. So.
It is a bit. I think that I would start with an event first. And I think what was really exciting is a couple of weeks ago, we did 2 events back to back in the wine market. We launched the World's Best Vineyards, and that was, we had a relatively new, well, there's a girl who didn't go to university, started in the events department. Her boss was removed reasonably quickly. She got promoted up, and she has taken this concept of the World's Best Vineyard from scratch, and we delivered it 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago now, in banqueting hall, and we got worldwide coverage. That was really exciting because the vibe in the room was unbelievably upbeat, and everybody was, and we got, it was a massive investment from our point of view, but everybody was enthusiastic and on the same page and getting it. And when you can create that environment, and I didn't create it, it was my idea, yes, but the execution was the events manager. She did a brilliant job. She found the location, she choreographed the whole thing. She even called the bloody slideshow and all the rest of it. And then to get that level of support and excitement from people literally all over the world, and admittedly not a huge number of them, but a number of them, was very exciting, and that just gives you a massive buzz. So from that point of view, I'd say that was my most exciting event to date. The most exciting sort of large-scale trade show would probably be April last year, so April 18, when we did the big shows up in Birmingham. We had 1,500 exhibitors, and as William Reed, we did a big stand in the crossover between hall 1 and 2, up the top of the steps. We put in a 29-meter screen, and it was just about doing something which hadn't been done before. And a screen's a screen, but going back to your point about what's changed in the exhibition industry, technology allows us to do things differently, and you can get a much higher impact for less cost and better quality now than you could have ever done in the past. But that's the same as you start with a black and white telly, and you've now got fancy stuff when you can feel as though you're almost sitting in the football stadium or whatever. But interesting, that's changing our view of colours, but that's a different conversation completely. So putting in that big screen was amazing, because we in 3 days we streamed more content than the BBC put out on their television stations in the UK in a week.
Wow. Okay.
Which is quite, you go, whoa, that is amazing.
Yeah.
And to pull all that together, and it's a big impact on our own employees, not just in the exhibitions division, but across the business, because they suddenly go, actually, wow, this is a big old business. We've got all this going on and all that going on, and we're doing that, and we're doing that. And then people wandering past going, whoa, who are these guys? This is impressive. And trying to get the balance between not being too flash, and being successful is important.
And avoiding that tech for tech's sake that we see quite a lot of the time now creeping in, is people just using things because an agency's told them it's really cool, rather than thinking, is this relevant to helping my customer, my visitor, move along that path to purchase? And
you mentioned a very strange word beginning with R then.
Relevance.
Correct.
It all comes back to relevance.
It's all about relevance, yeah.
So in all of those years then, you must have solved some really weird problems. So tell us about the strangest customer problem you have had to solve in the show.
Strangest customer problem. Now I'm just trying to think of something weird and wonderful, apart from the lions in a cage back in the 80s, which was,
it probably doesn't get weirder than that if that was one of your
which is quite strange. But no, I think that there's a certain amount of stuff which is just boring when somebody tries to, their high heels gone through the carpet over a hole in a duct and all the stuff that goes with that, and you just kind of go, this is just irritating. In fact, there is an interesting anecdote, which is I have a little bit, because of my background, and I just talked about the army bit and all the rest of it. We've got quite involved in health and safety, and I do understand the principles of health and safety, and I think that it is an area which, as organisers, it's a really pivotal role, this whole piece of health and safety. So most medium-sized organisations will get the operations department to run the health and safety. And I remember the first time we did a proper interactive gig, about 2002, I think it would have been. We had a health and safety advisor who was working with the operations team, and we had an ice sculptor on stage. Wow. And the guy came up, the health and safety advisor, I'm going to shut your show. I said, I'm sorry, I'm going to shut your show. I said, why are you going to shut the show? The bloke doing it was working with an electric chainsaw, and it's a health and safety hazard. I'm going to shut the show. So I took him aside quietly and said, look, with all due respect, you are paid to give me advice on what you think is safe and is not safe. And if you think this is dangerous, then your advice is to say to me, you think it's dangerous. I make the decision about whether the show shuts or it doesn't shut. That's my call, and I will go away and do a risk assessment. So you fill out the piece of paper, and if you actually do a proper risk assessment, you can alleviate the risks, and it's not dangerous. So we took him around the back, gave him a cup of coffee, and carried on. But it's those sorts of things, and I think it is very easy to just hide behind health and safety. Can't do that, health and safety, and you go, well, actually, if you think about it, you can. And we had a challenge with a nationality, was it? I think they were Indian or Chinese or something. They were definitely not European, building a double-decker stand, and the stairs were what's the word? Each step should be exactly the same height and depth. That's the specification you get. And the second step was slightly out. It was only about a quarter of an inch or something, slightly out. The break came, our health and safety got, well, shut this, doesn't work, it's dangerous. I go, so what's the problem? I said, well, you trip when you go up the stairs. So I said, why are you tripping? And he pointed out, what the problem was. And even though I knew it was wrong, I stumbled going up the step. Going down was fine, but going up, every time I walked up the step, knowing that step was incorrect, and I still stumbled. So we went off and did a little risk assessment. What's the risk? And how do you stop it? And all we did was we put a rope across, which you had to disconnect and reconnect, which then broke the cycle of eyes look at steps, measure step on the first occasion. Because we're all conditioned to steps being the same height, the brain automatically says this is the height for the next step. So your foot is raised the right height. But by breaking the cycle, you could go up and down steps and nobody tripped. But we could keep the stand going, and it was a double decker. So instead of closing off the top floor, and I think it's about looking at the detail and going through it properly and carefully, and then being prepared to accept responsibility, because ultimately it's me that carries the can, and I'm very clear about that. And from an operational point of view in all of our shows, if there's an issue, talk to me about it, and I will take the decision, and I will be the person that, because I'm the senior man present, that carries the can, stroke goes to jail. Because it's a very serious subject, but it is not, it doesn't have to be defining everything you do.
Absolutely. And I think it's a really, again, relevant point for exhibitors, because we so often get feedback that they're trying to spoil our fun, they're trying to stop us doing what we want to do. And it's just, they're trying to keep people safe. So if you just spend the time to think about, is there anything on my stand that could possibly harm somebody? And as you say, you'll always be able to mitigate that and change it in some way. So just think about it before you get there, and it saves a whole load of hassle.
The safest show would be an empty show.
Exactly.
Oops, and we've got a problem.
Yeah. That many people, that much power, that much stuff going on. There's always
that's right.
Yeah. Especially when we start cooking on stages as well. So
absolutely.
So you've obviously worked for years in lots of very exciting shows. Just looking to kind of come towards the end of our chat now. But if you could work on any exhibition anywhere in the world, what's the one that you look at and think, I just want to be involved in that one?
I'd be the UK food shows in Birmingham.
Okay, let me rephrase that question. Apart from your own shows.
Oh, I just, well, what? I mean, I could do a damn sight better job on the Oscars than they do. Very confident of that. We're very, very focused on the food and drink stuff on a global scale. So I'm happy. I do not covet my neighbour's event.
Yeah.
I might not buy them, but I don't want to go and run it for a year and then come back again, as it were.
Yeah.
No, I don't have a burning desire to go and move into the spring fair or something like that.
Consumer technology or electronics.
No, I don't know. I mean, I think the consumer stuff is exciting. It's obviously slightly different. But I think I get the fun that has, and I'm looking forward to pushing the boundaries slightly in some of the stuff we do. But I'm very happy with my in-train set. Thanks.
And you heard it here first, folks. The Oscars will be brought to you by William Reed in 2021. So quite a promise you made there, Andrew. So I look forward to seeing that come to life. So our very last question of the show: if you could change one thing about the industry, what would you like to change?
That's an interesting question. Actually, change one thing. Yeah, I would like to change the ownership structure and models around venues.
Oh, okay.
And do you want a reason for that?
Yes, please. Yes.
Well, I think that the exhibition industry is a relatively high margin industry once you get the model right, and there's an awful lot of private equity flying around in this market at the moment, because you can't. If nothing else is making any money anywhere really, so you buy a show and you can get a return. That kind of makes sense. And then venues become property plays, because we only have a certain amount of square footage in the UK, and I'm talking about the whole of the UK, not in venue terms, just the size. We live on an island, we have restricted space, so the land proposition changes from being this is a very nice place in the middle of nowhere, to this is now a centre of attraction of people, and therefore people come in to make money out of the venue and the estate that it sits upon, whether it's in London or Birmingham for that matter. And the dynamic changes and the focus changes, and all of a sudden the whole modus operandi changes. And I think that is going to be the single biggest driver to the way in which we work and operate, because it will define what we can and can't do. And I think that's a dangerous model to go down, because at the end of the day, it is very easy to kill the goose that lays the golden egg. And I think we should be really mindful and aware of that. And it's a tricky one. And I understand business pressures, and I understand it completely. But if I had a magic wand, that's the one thing I'd change.
And in your head, is there a solution that you think, an obvious solution to that, or is it just one of those tricky questions that will take some time?
It's a tricky conundrum, and I think as organisers we have to work very carefully with the venues to get them to understand the core proposition and the business model that surrounds the whole exhibition piece or live events piece. And it's not just about the organizer bringing a show, it's the economic impact that has, and the whole infrastructure that goes around it, the employment, and the AO economic impact study is really important for getting that message across. And we need to be careful and responsible, and we need to talk to government about business tourism. And tourism is so important in so many levels to so many people, and we mustn't forget that. And it is easy to take your eye off the ball and make a couple of grand and move, a couple of hundreds of thousands of pounds or hundreds of thousands of millions of pounds, and disappear off and go fine, and actually leave the rest of the world sort of floundering around in the dark slightly, which would not be good for lots of people and lots of businesses too.
And I think we do need
serious,
to think,
isn't it?
It is a little bit, ending on a rather serious note around sustainability and ecosystems around venues. But it's as you say, it's something that we can't think of exhibitions in isolation as a 3-day thing that happens in a big warehouse. It's got to feel like a venue is part of a sustainable long-term plan for a region that brings in tourism, brings in revenue continually, and just for a show. So yes, we ended on a rather serious note. But still, it has been a really good chat with you for the last half hour. Thank you so much for giving up your time to talk to us.
Overrun, I do apologise. That's
okay. You were very interesting, and the big announcement about William Reid taking over the Oscars is the highlight of the show. So
well, there you go.
So Andrew, if people want to get hold of you, I guess they can find you on LinkedIn or visit the William Reid website.
I don't really do LinkedIn too much. I'm not a great LinkedIner, but it's you know where I am.
Yes, you are in Crawley. If anybody wants to talk to you, they can always pick.
Correct. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. It has been a pleasure speaking to you, and good luck getting ready for, I think the restaurant show is the next thing on your agenda.
That's the next trade show we're doing. Yeah.
So tell us when and where that is.
That's in beginning of October at Olympia, on the assumption that the painters and decorators aren't in mucking it around.
Too much. Well, have a brilliant time at the restaurant show, and thank you so much for joining us this week.
That's a pleasure. See you soon. Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye. So thank you to Andrew Reid there of William Reid for his thoughts on the exhibition industry. And remember, folks, you heard it here first. William Reid to run the Oscars in 2020, maybe. Let's stay tuned and see if that happens. So coming up on the next episode of the Exhibitionist podcast, I am delighted to say that we have Daniel Priestley joining us. You may remember a few weeks ago when I came back from Portugal, I talked about what I'd learned from his book, Key Person of Influence, while I'd been enjoying the sunshine, and offered Daniel an invitation to join us on the podcast, which he thankfully accepted. So we've captured that conversation with Daniel, and it's a really interesting chat about how individuals and businesses can use trade shows and live events to build their influence and really be at the heart of their industry, and some really useful and practical, straightforward, down-to-earth advice from Daniel, as always. So look forward to that episode dropping in a couple of weeks. That's it from us for today. As always, you can contact us via the usual methods, but if you head over to www.inspiringexhibitors.com, that's where you'll find the blogs, podcasts, and ways to get in touch. As you may be aware from our newsletter, we are currently about to conduct a huge piece of research across the whole industry and in fact across the globe. We've been sending invitations out to a few hundred participants now who we've got lined up ready to answer our questions about what the shape of the trade show and exhibitions industry will look like in 2025. So if you want to get involved with that, please do give us a shout and we will send you the details of how you can get your voice heard, and we'll be hoping to publish that white paper in Q1 2020. So hope you have a good couple of weeks, whether you are summer holidaying or still at your desk trying to plan a busy autumn of exhibitions. If you do need any help from us, please do get in touch, and happy exhibitioning.
Hop over now to inspiringexhibitors.com to subscribe to our newsletters, blogs and future podcasts, keeping you up to date with industry insight. While there, you can also find out more about our new book, The Exhibitionist, Inspiring Trade Show Excellence. Once again, thank you for listening.